Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today is Beyond Efficiency, why AI is forcing marketing to rethink everything, not just cut costs. I'm joined by Kathy Macchi and Patrice Greene, co-founders of Inverta. Kathy, Patrice, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
So just to get us started a bit, why don't you, you both have very interesting backgrounds, so I'd love to explore that a little bit. Kathy, I know you have an IT background and then came to marketing. Patrice, you were early adopter of the marketing automation world, Eloqua, Marketo, and then you guys co-founded Inverta about 10 years ago. So just give us a little bit more about yourselves, and then also tell us how, what was your journey? How did you get to Inverta, and then kind of where you are today?
Kath, you want to go first, and then I'll jump in?
You are first, Patrice.
So my background, early adopter of marketing automation back in the early Eloqua days. I actually started out in sports marketing and got to a fork in my career and ended up following this marketing automation B2B path. And it was there that I actually met Kathy. So I spent a lot of years servicing the Eloqua community, the Marketo community in the early days before we decided to venture out and start Inverta. I'll let Kath give a little bit of background on herself, and then I'll sort of merge it as to how we ended up here.
So I'd like to say I'm a long-term survivor of the tech industry. I do have, Michael, as you said, an IT ops background. So I've never had the luxury of separating marketing strategy from marketing infrastructure. And so understanding how teams work, how data flows, how systems are built, they're no longer, I think, just back office concerns. It dictates your whole marketing infrastructure, dictates what marketing can actually do and how people experience your brand now. It's all those things that underpin, technology underpins all that now. So, yeah. Patrice?
Yeah. And so Kath and I met, again, when we were servicing the marketing automation community, and, the firm that I was with at the time was very, what do you need us to do in marketing automation? We'll go do it for you. So think of, tech implementer, and our clients needed strategy. And so I met Kath, and I would pull her into these accounts and be like, help them with strategy. And I think it was through that we just really started realizing there was a large gap in the marketplace as marketing technology was being adopted in B2B. And there were a lot of strategists out there that would dream up these strategies that just weren't feasible. I mean, even back in the serious decision days, right? It would be like, here, go do this. But then, the word that we would hear from CMOs is like, okay, but what do I tell my team to do next? Like, how do I actually translate strategy into operational actions, right, that need to happen? And how do I make sure that my strategy is taking into account these technologies that I have now in my MarTech stack and taking advantage of them? And so we just kind of felt like there was a lot of strategy-led, but not tech-enabled firms out there. And there were a lot of tech-enabled firms out there, but they didn't have strategy. And we really wanted to bridge that gap. And that has been kind of who we are since day one and who we still are, right? Strategy-led, tech-enabled, and supporting our clients with that, like, roll up your sleeves, operational consulting.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Well, Kathy, in our prep meeting, you were telling me about a CMO council that you held at the end of 2025. And I know you said the consensus was that the marketers thought they'd be further along with AI than they actually are, that maybe the results, the outcomes weren't meeting expectations from a business impact perspective. Now that's a pretty big gap between expectations, which have been high on AI for a while, and the reality. I mean, what do you think went wrong, and what were the CMOs telling you about the results that weren't showing up?
I think everyone started out with gave people tools, they gave people training, and it's a great starting point. Like, you have to do that. But I think the value got was people wrote content faster, they summarized meetings. But there was never revenue impact. And I think two things happened. One, I think teams are I think the last two quotes from CMOs recent, my teams are at 150%. Like, getting things out the door, no one has the brain space left to take on like one more thing. And
Mhm.
I also think what happened was everyone got better at using AI. Like I use it, everyone in your team, everyone uses
Mhm.
it. But until you start doing workflows where it goes across teams, everything gets optimized for the individual. And so you didn't have a set workflow that said, okay, I'm going to go from campaign to pipeline. What does that look like? What teams? Where are the handoffs? And I think it just gets back to, like, I think we know it works now. Like, you have to have a measurable outcome.
Mhm.
You have to build specific you have specific use cases. You've got to redesign the whole workflow. You have to make managers responsible for helping individuals come up with those use cases. Like, it can't be you figure it out on your own. Um, and then I think a lot of teams that have been successful start putting that in as a performance measurement. Some have AI ambassador programs. Some make
Mhm.
markets actually build and demonstrate use cases. So I think not leaving it, the common thread is don't leave it to adoption to chance. Like, you have got to create clarity, accountability, and support around it. And I think everyone initially just said
Mhm.
they thought it would just magically happen, and
Yeah.
it doesn't. So I think that's where
It,
people are now.
it was interesting over the last couple of years, conversations with executives, not just in marketing, but certainly applies, I think, to what you were just talking about, was that focus really, especially with generative AI, was the focus was purely on productivity. And to me, that, it sounds interesting, but the problem was nobody was trained, nobody knew how to use the tools, and productivity doesn't necessarily reach the outcome that you're looking for, right? So that's an interesting observation from a CMO perspective too. That the focus on the right metrics, but also the workflow really is the driver of that. And I think we tend to get focused on the tech sometimes.
I think overly focused on the tech.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, that
always
makes
been the
sense.
case. Buy
Yeah.
first, figure out business impact later.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I grew up in the tech world, so I understand that from a vendor perspective, but from a user perspective, little rough. Patrice, you said something that I thought really captured lot of this. Last year, on people focused on efficiency, they piled AI on their workflows, and the pipeline didn't go up. Nothing changed. So now the question's now what? I mean, if the efficiency gains weren't translating into revenue, what do you think marketing leaders should be doing differently this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of piggybacks on what Kath was saying when, she was leading our CMO councils and she's done some interviews with some of our clients. And, I don't even know if efficiency gains actually have been truly realized. I think
Mhm.
individuals have figured out how to do their jobs better, right? They figured out,
Yeah.
wow, like I can do my job more effectively. I can get more done. That's both great and bad because now I'm being asked to do more. But I think now what we're seeing is just a recognition, like a recognition of, okay, that's great, right? Like everybody in my team is using it. But
Mm.
now, how? What's the next step that I take? And I think those are the conversations that we're having now, which is like, you tell me, what are the use cases that are going to drive business
Yeah.
impact? How do we think about this? Where, we just talked about, you said, people buy technology and, it's rarely a technology problem. I'm actually seeing right now there's a rapid adoption of AI
Yeah.
solutions, point solutions at that. So I think we're going to start to see rev tech stacks kind of balloon overnight because they don't want to be left behind, fear of missing out, right? And so they're
Yeah.
trying the latest thing and they're buying. I mean, every client we go into, it's like, have you heard of this one? Have you heard of this one? And so I think we're going to start to see an effort to try to figure out like which of these is having an impact. How do I rethink? I think people are really thinking about how do I rethink marketing and how we operate. And I think it's an opportunity to really rethink the demand model and how we go about engaging with our buyers. So we're starting to see CMOs take a step back and go, all right, where do I start? What are the use cases? And how do I rethink the way that we're doing marketing?
Mm. I mean, I think that's really productive. I know a lot of the companies that I've talked to lately, that focus on productivity, the focus on perhaps the tech more than the problem, sort of ended up automating a bunch of broken processes that they were just broken faster, right? It
Yeah.
didn't really solve anything. So
Yeah, we say that by the way a lot of with AI right now, and folks on our team that Kathy's working with day in and day out is this client, if they want us to help them with this problem that they came to us with, we're just going to be using AI to automate bad process or broken process.
Yeah.
And so getting people to understand that we actually need to focus on process first, is a challenge, especially when speed is really right. There's a real palpable feeling of needing to move with speed right now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I mean you're right about the FOMO part. I think that's true, and honestly, too, the history of marketing tech for the last 20 years has been very fragmented. Right? There are a lot of little point solutions that people brought in. They could easily bring them in with a credit card, and it wasn't a, a enterprise wide sort of thing. And so you just had all this fragmented tech that wasn't really tied together all the time either. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a situation that's been there, and now we just add AI on top of it.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Kathy, I know you compared, what's happening now with marketing to what happened in ERP and supply chain, around 2000, and the idea that you have to rethink the whole workflow, not just bolt AI onto what you already have, and that's a big ask for marketing. I mean, what does this really look like to when you redesign your go-to-market workflows with AI, at the core rather than just a bolt on?
I think it is. It's back, like you said, the ERP days. I mean, finance, supply chain, manufacturing all had to work together, and they were not used to doing that. And so it has to take. That's why this has to come from the CMO. They're the only ones that can make each team work together. So as Patrice said, don't do the same work faster. Pick an outcome that
Mhm.
you know cuts across a lot of teams. Could be account prioritization. Could be campaign to pipeline. If it's campaign to pipeline, you've got to say, okay, where's the research happening? Where am I losing time? Where do approvals slow things down? Where are multiple people creating sort of the same thing going on? Where does strategy end and production begin? And in the old days, you used to get in
Mm.
like a workflow. You get a whiteboard and post-it notes and
Yeah.
pull it out. But now I think what you have to decide, then once that's there, what can AI do? What can agents do? Where do you need humans in it? And I think if you skip that step, like Patrice said, just accelerate the mess you had.
Yeah.
And it's already messy, a campaign process, because it
Mhm.
involves, as you know, product marketing, marketing ops, campaign
Yeah.
people, the social people. And the CMO is the only one that can really drive that change
Mm.
and making it happen.
That makes sense. I mean, it seems to me that so marketing in general has not really been focused around use case and workflows, right? It's not necessarily the core strength, maybe. Um, but if you outsource it to IT, which is a place where a lot of companies have focused on workflow and process, they don't know marketing. So, like, who should own this? How do how do organizations bridge that gap? You said the CMO. Can the CMO really accomplish that when we cross organizations? And what do you, as a firm that comes in, Inverta come in, how do you play in this to help, get both sides at the table talking?
Patrice, you want to take that to start, and I'll just
Yeah, I'll take the
color.
you can follow up with me, but I think there's a couple of things. I think sometimes companies like Inverta, right, that sort of understand strategy, understand what I would call it the rev ops infrastructure part of
Mm.
B2B. We're usually translators, quite honestly. And I think rev
Yeah.
ops actually, really strong rev ops internal resources can act as translators. Especially right now, there's a lot of discussion on, when you think about build versus buy. And if we're going to build and we're going to leverage AI,
Mm.
are we going to use internal teams that are sitting in IT? And I could go down a rabbit hole on what's going to end up there, because I think marketing is going to be the last person that's going to get access to those resources. So then usually they end up having to use their own internal RevOps team, who are also overloaded, which is why then they turn to outside firms for support. So I think it's translation of the outcome they're trying to drive towards, what's happening right inside the world of marketers, and technically what we need to do to make this solution come to life. So I think that's a huge component that we help them play. And Kathy and I actually talked last week about this. We were spending some time on our own AI solutions for our clients, and said, we kind of were like, throw away the word transformation. It's really about helping our clients get traction with AI. I think sometimes transformation can feel like so big. And by the way, what are we transforming to? Because we do need to rethink the way marketing works. And I think a lot's going to change over the next 18 months. And if anybody says this is where we're going, I think they're just theorizing, right? And so it's about how do we get traction to move in this direction with all this opportunity that surrounds us right now.
Mhm.
I also think another aspect is if you go back to the supply chain days, Michael, partners came in a lot because you are the neutral third party trying to mediate. This is what marketing wants. This is what sales wants. This is what BDRs want. This is what the RevOps team, and really trying to come up with. It's a lot of facilitation. I mean, that's what those firms came in to do. And I think where we come in is we understand marketing, but we also understand workflows, data, how teams work together. So I think you've got to have marketing expertise. You have to have organizational design expertise. You have to know how to facilitate. You have to know data and systems and workflow design. And it doesn't end there, because to roll this out, you need change management.
Mhm.
Like, now we have to work differently. And so I think there's a lot of skills in that. Even if marketing could do a workflow and a design, if they throw it over to IT, they don't know what a go-to-market motion looks like and where all those strategic points are. So I think you'd get back a solution that doesn't really work. And then who's going to roll it out? Not
I
IT.
also think, Kath, on the change management, I think there's a new component that, she said mediate. Sometimes we call ourselves marketing therapists, right? But I think there's a new thing in here, which is you've got teams and resources that have anxiety and fear about their jobs right now. And you really need to make sure the communication around change management is sensitive, right, to what's going on in their world right now.
Yeah.
I think that the difference also with change management, Michael, if you look back, because you were around in those ERP days, we at least had an end goal we were going towards. With AI, there is no end result. Like, what it's going to look like 3 years from now, no one knows. So it's like, it's a very different type of change management. And I've been rethinking, what does that look like when it's going to be like, well, this is what it looks like now, but when Claude has a new update or Gemini comes out,
Dynamic change management.
that's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah.
Is how do you keep that upkeep, that design, that maintenance of it all? I mean, you're managing systems now, and that's not a marketing expertise.
Yeah. I mean, most of the companies that I've seen that have, had failures or problems with their implementation, that they were misdirected to focus on the tech and not on the people. And I think you hit on the big issue there, right? There's a lot of, there's a need to develop trust in the AI, but over time that trust is turned into fear that, both from a personal job perspective, but also a fear of what might happen from things operate at machine speed. Does that provide, greater brand risk perhaps than you would have had it with other kind of approaches and that sort of thing? So interesting.
I think accountability is going to be huge. So if you approve the workflow and something goes wrong, are you responsible? Like, who do you point the finger at when something goes off? I mean,
yeah, that's and it's certainly, it gets more complicated the more agents and the more autonomous agents you mix into that problem.
Yep.
So, we talked a little bit earlier about the C-suite focus on productivity, particularly in marketing, and I think we've seen that result in some cost cutting, reductions, that sort of thing. And I, last year I saw a quote from Gartner. They said that 50 to 60% of the people you fire today, you're going to need to rehire in 2 years. I mean, how do you think CMOs ought to be framing this conversation, particularly, when they need to push back on the board or on the CEO, when they just focus on this cost-cutting narrative? And how do you make a better case for a different kind of investment here?
I mean, Kath, I'll be interested in your thoughts here, but I feel like whatever they do, they can't be the receiver of what to do with AI. And I think if you allow the business to form a position on what marketing should be doing with AI, and then there's a mandate that's coming down to cut costs, that's going to be hard to recover from. I think the strongest CMOs need to have political capital, right, to be in the room for those types of conversations. And they better quickly, right, make sure that they're setting a vision for where AI can enhance the business, not even just marketing, right? Because marketing's, always been the department where we can't really justify the cost that we give you. We've been talking about
We think we should invest here, but
right. It's not like B2C where, it's a little bit easier because we can see direct, transactional information. And so, we've got buyer groups that are very large and whatnot. And so I think that there's a need for political capital and a vision for how marketing can impact the business and the role AI is going to play in that impact. And that story can't be all about efficiency, right? That story's got to be about being able to reach your buyers, your audience, your clients in a way that we couldn't do previously, that's going to impact the brand experience and really, right, elevate that brand and bring you above your competition.
Yeah, I think especially now, you have to have that revenue conversation. It has to be, how do we grow our accounts? Like Patrice said, how do you grow fast? It's a growth conversation, especially now that buyer journey is going to be AI mediated. If you're not investing now with how you show up, you are not even going to be in the conversation. Like, this
Right.
is
So
where you need investment.
And then you had CEOs that are like, cut costs. Because they think of marketing sometimes, unfortunately, as still like execution, right? It's just putting emails out and ads out, and that's, like Kathy just said, no, your buyers are going to be, right, experiencing your brand in a whole new way, and so you need to be thinking about AI's impact there, not just in cost efficiency. I mean, there is cost, by the way, there is efficiencies to be gained. There's no denying that. It's just that's not the whole picture.
Yeah, I mean that does seem very interesting from the idea that we've really focused on this productivity piece or the cost cutting piece, and yet the real opportunity perhaps is more about shifting that focus to growing revenue, or figuring out ways to do that marketing brand experience more effectively with your customers, and that's a bit harder to measure, but it is measurable.
Well, if you're not planning for that now, you will not be around. I mean, that is totally changing how buyers are going to buy. And if you're just thinking you're going to cut costs, you won't even you won't even show up on the results in AI when people are looking for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've done surveys for several years now around buyer behavior and how much it's shifted. And I, when I work with sales and sales tech companies, I've often talked about the fact that we tend to try to sell the way we've always sold, even though buyers are not buying the same way. So when we have issues, we think it's productivity, right? If if 100 cold calls don't work, then 1,000 must be better, and 2,000 must be even better, and yet the numbers don't really ever drive the results that you're looking for.
No.
Yeah. So you guys mentioned to me, and I like this a lot. Probably if there are any McKinsey friends in the audience, you won't like this, but you called it the McKinsey threat, that if marketers don't define how AI fits in their function, then pretty soon the management consultants are going to come in and define it for you, and then you lose control over the process and the outcomes. How real is that risk, and how do CMOs what do they need to do right now to stay ahead of that?
Yeah.
You can chime in. So I think CMOs need to step up to the plate and say, how is AI, they need to find how it changes marketing, what roles are going to be transformed, what skills does it require, what processes need to get redesigned, and they have to come up and document a point of view that's defensible and connected to business outcomes. I mean, that's all it is. And then say, here's how the go-to-market's changing, and then here's the decisions I made on investments, and here's why. Here's what we're keeping core, here's where AI is helping, and here's what we're outsourcing. And they've got to put it together. But I'd say it's more than just McKinsey. If you're bringing in outside systems, if you're not defining your workflows and where judgment is, where these different things happen, the software company's deciding that, or your CFO is deciding. Like, you have got to make those decisions about marketing. And I don't know.
I think
if they step up.
To me, we've seen this before. I mean, this is when finance CEOs, executive teams, bring in outside, whether it's a McKinsey, an outside consultant, whatnot, and again, marketing is a receiver. They are invited to the table to be told the output, right, of that work.
Sure.
And that's oftentimes, I mean, this is back in the days when, like, remember demand centers sort of came about, and it was like, how would you centralize, decentralize? What kind of organizational model do you have for marketing? We saw this come about because they would be doing organizational studies with a McKinsey, and then that would be, marketing was one component of that. And there was no understanding of how marketing operates. And so oftentimes back then, we would be supporting the marketer in what they need to go to that meeting with and how they control that. And I think this is very similar. It sort of touches on what we just talked about with the CEO, right, and the C-suite, and just making sure that marketing is driving that vision for what's needed in marketing, and not being the receptor of it.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me in a way, you could talk about having to fall back to the technologist and the vendors as they come in, they redefine your process based on the process of the product. I mean, that was sort of the problem that got way out of hand in the late 90s and early 2000s with ERP, right? The rigid process versus coming in and actually trying to redesign around the workflow that you needed to do in your individual business, not some best practice kind of an approach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about Salesforce. Think about the early days of
Mm,
Salesforce, and right, the ability to really highly customize that environment to your own
yeah,
unique sales process. And I think marketing technology has been, the original Eloqua's Marketo's part out. It's like has been
yeah,
somewhat limited in that flexibility. I think AI is going to bring the ability to really truly customize operational workflow, right, for environments. Because again, if you sell a $1 million solution and you have an 18-month sales cycle, you have a very different, right, approach to marketing than
yeah,
somebody that's selling a $5,000 solution that can be bought on an Amex by a developer, right? Like,
yeah.
very different.
No, that's fair. So Kathy, you published some work on future state of the marketing organization, and I'm curious about this four-box framework that you put in place for thinking about what's strategic and core versus what's operational, non-core, when to hire internally versus outsource versus automate. I mean, can you walk us through that model and how it applies to an organization that's trying to figure out where AI agents fit into their team structure?
Yeah, I think part of this goes back to how do CMOs have a framework to say where does AI fit? What do I have to have internal versus what is external? Where is efficiency? And so
Mm,
I went back to that Geoffrey Moore, what's core and what's context.
yeah.
And he had a four box. And if you remember the top right hand, is that's what differentiates your business. That's the strategic part of it. That would be your narrative, your positioning, your competitive research, your pricing, your packaging, anything that really
Mm,
differentiates, your your tiering of accounts. That you keep in house. AI can help across all, but that's how you decide where that would help. Then think of the other side, so the top left side, still strategic, but things that depend on what you've come up in the top right corner. So think of you could outsource it though. You're going to do your
mm,
ABM campaigns, your content strategy, your Martech design, like all that type of stuff can fit up there. If you look at the bottom left hand corner, even though it's operational, so think of it source of advantage as your x axis, your y axis is strategic outcomes. So if you got operational stuff, like I said, how people experience your brand now is through how your tech is set up in those processes. So think of it as workflow. This is your institutional excellence, budget
mm,
management, workflow designs, customer relations management, anything like that. And that, again, you want to probably keep the core design in house. And then anything in the bottom left hand is you could outsource that
right.
SEO, blog creation, media tracking, anything like that. And so it starts to give you a framework about what's strategic and what isn't, what's operational. And then I think from there you can decide this is how I'm using AI, but I'm using it just in these core areas to support.
Mm,
Like that's more of a thought partner in your top right hand corner. Well, the bottom,
right.
it can do all that
Yeah.
executional work. But I also think it gives you credibility. If you're going into a meeting with the board or with the executive team, you just can't go and say, well, this is what I think. It's like, here's how I'm thinking about it. Let
Yeah.
people push back on your strategy. Like I said, you've got to define where AI fits in marketing. You're going to need a framework to defend it. other than, well, this person sits here, so I want to keep them. It's like, no, this is, realistically, I'm thinking about to drive revenue outcomes.
Mm. I mean, it is interesting too. You mentioned the areas that you could outsource in the past, and now the opportunity could be that, some AI solutions can take care of what you might have outsourced to an agency or something before too. So that's
Yeah.
opportunity, but you have to understand which pieces can be dealt with in each way. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And no one has unlimited time and budget. So I think you need
Yeah.
to be strategic about, like I said, teams are already maxed out. So where's the best bang for your buck on that? But it
Mm.
gives you a way to start to decide that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one of the things that I keep coming back to in the show and book that I published last year too, about digital workforce and, how humans and AI agents need to work together in a hybrid model. When we apply that to marketing, what do you think that hybrid team should look like? And are we heading towards that world where, marketing managers are managing agents and humans, onboarding roles, performance reviews, all those things? I mean, do you see that model emerging?
I mean, I do. I think that, and we have some clients
Mhm.
that have talked about their vision of this. And I think what we will see, I think first, though, workflow has to get redesigned because we wouldn't really, I think to try to take existing workflow and then use agents, I think would be a disservice to what's
Yeah.
possible, right, in a future state world. But I think once you redefine workflow and you think about it in the world of, to Kathy's four box, what needs to be strategic and in-house, and where do I leverage my best marketers, right, to get um, more out of them, to scale, right, my best marketers, where do they have agents that they potentially manage, where is their human led versus where is their human in the loop? And I do think we'll start to see
Mm.
outsource. To Kathy's point about budget, I think that there's going to be a move or a mandate for marketing to have more variability in their budget so that the business can scale up and down that
Mm.
budget. And that means you need much more of a flexible workforce, right? And so I think we'll see a combination of outsourcing as well as a combination of managing agents.
But I think you're going to have similar management challenges with agents as you'll have with people. They'll be different. So you imagine all these capabilities, but as the manager, you still need to set the goals. What
Mhm.
do the constraints look like? What does good look like? You're going to have to do quote performance reviews. Like you're reviewing
Yeah.
the work still, you're responsible. And there's going to be performance reviews, like the
Mm.
strategy changes. What do I need to do? So I think you'll be an orchestrator, but it'll be interesting how you
I
end up
feel like
managing agents.
the ability for, like, because right now there's always a problem of random acts of marketing and marketing, right? And is it
Yeah.
tethered to a strategic plan? And are we staying to that plan? And are the teams operating together? I actually think, Kathy, like the way that you're describing it, there's probably a heightened ability for random acts of marketing if you don't have the oversight and the control over it.
Mm.
Well, and if you don't have the guardrails, one of the small experiments we started with a client is they had a very good brand name. They were high end, but we were just trying to test the media and having an agent run it. Well, the agent initially we just tuned it for performance. Well, the ad that did best was one that was like this, basically a discount free, like a free thing. Well, it over optimized for that, but over time, if we had not caught that, their brand would have started to be a low cost provider. And
Yeah.
so that's why I say you have to manage your agents and really watch what are the goals you're giving it, what are the guardrails,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
and
it's goals and
yeah,
those boundaries, those guardrails, those hard guardrails have to be tied in. That makes a lot of sense,
yeah.
particularly in a performance environment, and that shift too, right? I mean, we don't measure performance of the technology tools the same way we'd measure performance of a digital worker that we're actually trying to treat like a part of our hybrid workforce.
Hmm.
Yeah, interesting.
Interesting times. Uh huh.
Yes, it is. Well, so we talked a little bit about buyer behavior shift, and I think that that's been acknowledged now for several years that buyers were changing, and of course, with the with all the answer engine type situation now too, they buyers have much more access to information. But you know, for this year, I know you guys have a theme around this around this shift. I mean, how do you think AI is reshaping the buyer's journey? And And what does that mean for how marketing and sales need to adapt the go-to-market approach?
Do you
Okay.
want me to start?
Sure.
Well, I mean, we are getting inquiries that people found us on AI. So I mean, there's just the whole thing about how do you rethink when you have to create content and messaging for machines and for people. So there's that whole GEO, AEO, whatever you want to call it, that you're going to have to
Yeah.
think about. But I also think you have to rethink your whole content. How do you get it consistent across all your different channels, across all the people that interact with clients? Because if you're not clear with all that, AI will fill in the gaps. They're going to decide the
Yeah.
impression of your brand. So I think really understanding how that works, but also for a client coming in, like you're going to have a tighter go to market with sales. So what are these accounts? What is the intent? How are we reading those signals together? And how are you giving them that message also to interact with the buyer when they finally come in? I mean, Patrice?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. If people think about we talk about buyer groups, right? And the buyer's journey and buyer changing, right? 2 years ago, it was changing. Now we have agents potentially doing research on behalf. So you now have a new role in the buyer group that we have to consider in terms of the agent role and what that's doing and how do we organize our content so that they can find us. I think the stat is, what 70% of the journey is done before they reach out to you. Oh, and by the way, if you're not in their shortlist from day one, your chances are like, I don't know, below 5% or something.
Yeah.
So it's don't quote me directly on that. So I think that we have to really consider, how access to information, how our content is being organized to provide that access to information, how our website is being managed. We're hearing clients want to, I think I just saw a post from somebody on LinkedIn that was comparing websites from a month ago to websites today and their positioning around AI. And so that was the point of the post, was all around their positioning around AI. My head was going to look how fast they're updating their website to meet buyers with where they are in real time. And so now we have to update our websites way differently than we ever did in the past. And so that's going to require all new workflows and solutions and ways that we work internally to be able to meet that need. And then, like Kathy said, with ABM, I think now it's also how do you use AI to be able to execute a go-to-market in a way that we always envisioned, but could never actually do because of time constraints to get it done. So think about research that would allow us to get so specific and scale one-to-one programs. We could not, if you talked to us 2 years ago and you told us you had 50 accounts in your one-to-one program, we're like, there's no way you have, right? Like that's, if you truly want to do one-to-one ABM, the level of research that's required is, so now there's actually an ability to scale all these things.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the theme of rethinking the way we work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It changes the scale a lot on some of those things too. That's interesting.
Yeah, what used to be a luxury is now possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so looking at your own clients, and I, I assume they're probably, businesses I talk to in general kind of move through proof of concept or MVP. They have some hypothesis they're trying to test, that sort of thing. And now just starting to move into production with a lot of those systems. I mean, for the marketing leaders in the audience who are at that same place trying to figure out, where do you start? How do you move through the proof of concept pilot? What's the most important thing they should, get right now before they try to scale?
That's all you, Kath.
A use case where you have like a workflow problem with a measurable outcome. And I think that it's small enough that you can learn from it, but big enough that it will actually matter when you put it in place. And so you've got to have a way to show this is going to work, and you've got to go across teams to make it stick and then drive that change management. But pick some workflow where there's a problem and there's a measurable outcome. Like we want to increase campaign strategy to execution by 25%. Like pick something and then do it. The other one that's probably the biggest one right now is between marketing and BDRs. Like BDRs are probably being disrupted far more than marketing right now. That whole world is changing. In fact, I did a whole session on it actually 2 sessions on Friday about that. So again, that could be a good one, like the handoff between marketing and sales. So think of account prioritization. You have to get marketing, BDR, sales, and RevOps all on the same page. And just getting those definitions. What does good look like? How are we going to interpret these signals? What do those handoffs look like? What's going to be relevant when we do that? Just getting that down, then, add the AI in the workflow. But just coming up with those definitions make a huge difference, whether you had AI or not, actually.
Yeah. I mean, just having the right metrics in place and being able to measure against those can drive a lot of performance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so that's all the time we have for the conversation today. Really interesting, by the way. Thank you for that. But before I let you go, one thing I like to do at the end of every episode is get recommendations for the audience. Somebody that you think would be interesting for them to follow, thought leader, an author. And I've had all kinds of interesting suggestions. So feel free to let your imagination wander a bit there. But I'd love to get a recommendation from each of you, if I could, for the audience.
Kath, I'd be so interested to see who you say. If your audience is caring about B2B marketing specifically, I honestly think Kerry Cunningham. I think he's one of the most insightful, interesting. He has the research to back it up. And I honestly, every single solitary thing he posts, I learn, every single one. He just makes me think differently. And so I find him pretty fascinating to follow.
I agree, but I feel he's a friend now. So, you've good. Now I have to say you've given Kerry. I would tell from an author, Jeff Woods. Mm-hmm. He has written, I think came out a year, The AI-Driven Leader. And he has a podcast. He has posts all the time. And if you're a CMO, I think it's great. Any leader in an organization should read it and follow him. You're going to learn a lot.
Great. Very good recommendations. Thanks very much. And thank you both for joining today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having us. It was a ton of fun.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.